Our next guest, the longtime executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada and now free agent that we claim as our own, John Shannon, joins us once again here on Sikeris and Price. Can you just be ours? Can we just go from Sikeris and Price, John Shannon? How about that?
Hey, listen, if the check's big enough, you can do anything you want.
You know that ain't the case here.
No, I know.
That's the wrong place for that, sir. Hey, we've got some broadcasting notes here. So we'll start there before we get to our poll question on the Canucks and stuff. We do have some broadcasting notes on a couple of fronts. I'll start with Scott Russell, who signed off from the Paralympics, and say goodbye. We knew this wasn't a surprise, but we knew this was going to happen. He's 66 years of age. Much like Brian Williams before him, it's just been omnipresent at these sorts of events. He could have gone deeper if he wanted to. I mean, I think he's in decent health, right, John? At 66, I mean, a lot of guys in his position that have these plum spots, I mean, they push it as far as they can. Why do you think he stopped here at 66?
I don't really know, other than he's actually moving into the education world as a chancellor of a small university here in Ontario.
Wow, okay.
So you get a good offer to think about moving, and you have less pressure. And you can ease into what I would describe as semi-retirement, then you consider doing it. Scott was with us and with me for a long time at Hockey Night, and people in the West would remember Scott was, and I've never forgotten this. My mother, who, when she was alive, always talked about Russell, Cuthbert, and Millen, and Kelly Rudy as her boys, and that was the Western crew for Hockey Night for so many years in the 1990s, and Scott was a big part of that. And I think that there was a realization at some point in Scott's life that he was never going to be the regular host of Hockey Night. Ron was going to be there for a long time. And when Brian left for CTV, it gave Scott an opportunity when the Olympics came back to carve out his own niche. And that's exactly what he did at the CBC, and did it so well. No one's more passionate about good television than Scott. And then he really got to reinvigorate his passion for amateur sports. And he fit in perfectly to what the CBC stood for over the last 15 years. And, you're right. Every second year, whether it be winter games or summer games, he did a marvelous job as the primetime host, as the face of the Olympics, just like Brian was for so many years. So any accolades he receives are well-deserved. And I can tell you one thing, and sometimes you don't necessarily see it, but Scott is a very passionate guy. And once he decided that the Olympics and amateur sports were going to be his focal point, he lived and died with them. And the viewer was really the winner of that, because he did such a marvelous job.
And people might have he might have been a little hidden in that he was doing a lot of the streaming stuff on CBC. It wasn't just that he was just doing these games. I think he was on Gem and such on the weekends doing a lot of the amateur sport that, unless you are a fan of downhill skiing or track and field, those fans seek it out, but it's not in your face on your TV guide per se. But he was still working on a weekly basis there for CBC.
He, doing the Olympics, if you have a regular occurring show like they did, the CBC did, it's a lifestyle, because with all the sports that are involved, and Saturday afternoons, you're right, either on Gem or on the main network, there was always something that Scott was hosting. He and Andy were always doing that together for the most part. So from that perspective, he didn't disappear. He just changed his address, and did a marvelous job doing it.
John, let's kind of move forward here a little bit and talk about, the Vancouver Canucks, and they're now into their Jake Milford golf tournament, which is today, which is the unofficial kickoff to the season. A lot of talk around the team, obviously, about Demko. We'll get into that as well. But Brock Boeser, our poll question here today is, what should a contract extension, what should a term for a contract extension look like for Brock Boeser? 4 years, 5, 6, or 7 to 8?
Well, if I guess if you're the player,
Yeah.
it's one number, and if you're the team, it's another. My number's 4.
Okay.
I'm a 4-year guy. I not necessarily in hockey, but Paul Beeston always had this attitude: never sign a baseball player to more than 5 years for a very good reason. And I think if you can hold true to that in hockey, you're probably doing the right thing. 4 years is a long time in the National Hockey League. You guys both know that, the wear and tear. Boeser, let's face it, has reinvigorated himself one more time for the Canucks. So if there was a way to get him to a 4-year deal, if you needed to compromise to get to a 5th year, then do it. But to me, a 4-year deal, at what number, Irf? What would you say the number is? Is it 7? Is it more? What are you thinking about?
I think it's going to be at least the number has to start with an 8. If it was a long-term deal, the number, like I think at a 7-year, 8-year deal, $50 million would have to be the bare minimum. I don't think that there's been talks. I think it's been pretty quiet over the summer between the two sides. I think the most important thing, John, is when we look at it, is that he's healthy, right? You know, he had the blood clot issue. He had all that, and he's by all accounts, he's healthy and he's ready to go. So if you're the player, I think when you look at the negotiations here, it's like, okay, well, we'll wait and see. But I mean, John, you know, Jim Rutherford in that camp, what if they wait and see too long and this guy ends up with 25, 30 goals here in the regular season?
It does beg the question: is what is a 30-goal scorer worth in the National Hockey League? And man, oh man,
it's changing, right? Because the
time,
it's going to go up. An $8 million player might end up being a pretty average player in 3-4 years' time.
Wow, that's an amazing thing. I mean, now we're talking NHL numbers, which pale in comparison to NFL numbers, but
right. Or NBA,
yeah, but at the same time, when you're still working on such a low cap number compared to other leagues, and when you're talking about a new contract when it comes into play, we're going to assume, I think, from now on that there's going to be an escalator every year of $5 million at least. So we're talking $100 million cap within 2.5 years, then that might make some sense. So that's really the challenge. Hopefully we don't have any more years where the cap just goes flat, and we can get to that 3-figure cap number, and that would allow, I think, a lot more players to justify those numbers. 8 years for Brock Boeser. I'm sorry, 8 years for Brock Boeser. I just don't see it. I really don't see it. That's all, and probably because of the way Boeser plays the game too. When was the last time he played 82 regular season games?
I think he had a surprisingly good run up until the blood clot, but he does certainly have a reputation to live down.
Right.
74 and 71 in the last 2 years, so decent years in terms of reliability, but he's still missing games.
And you're right about the blood clot. Has it cleared up? Yes. Is he healthy? Yes. I would assume that he's going to be on medication for the rest of his playing career. Which would then, does that create a little bit of a dilemma for the hockey club as well? That's going to be an interesting discussion. What you hope in this situation, you just hope it doesn't become a distraction for the year, and they find one way or the other to get it settled quickly.
I mean, if I'm Brock Boeser, I'm asking for, if they come at me with 4, I'm pushing 2 back their direction then, because I want a long-term deal before I retire if I'm Brock Boeser. No, I mean, if they're not willing to go long-term with me now, then I'll stick around and see if they can win here in the next couple of years. I mean, that would be a 2-year contract extension. So that'd be 3 more years of Boeser. Mm-hmm. And then at the age of 30, 31, he gets to sign wherever the hell he pleases.
Interesting. I think there are times that we assume guys like Boeser are older than they truly are.
Yeah.
And he's been around a long time. He's been around a lot longer than people realize. So from that perspective, if you can, when you start to sign contracts and you get guys into the 33, 34 years of age, this, for so many reasons, not necessarily ability, but for budgetary reasons, this has become a young man's sport. Guys on controllable contracts early in their careers, that's a real challenge. So that to me is an interesting part of this too.
I had somebody ask me the other day about offer sheets, and we're a little bit past the Oilers news. It's not newsy, but when you do go back now and look at the last few summers, there's been a couple of offer sheet news items here. Does it start to get normalized? Do we see one per year maybe for in offer sheets? How much did this one scandalize the managers groups?
Well, I think managers always wonder about offer sheets, and does this open the floodgates? Not necessarily, but I think you have to now look at guys of the ilk of Broberg and Holloway that are coming out of really their first contracts, proving that they belong. And it goes back to something I think we talked about when the offer sheets came out, is the penalties for signing these guys right now under this CBA are minor, minor compared to what they truly are. You're getting Broberg, who's a first round pick, a second round pick, and a third. And I think that there'll be more. I really do. I think they will be more. I really do think there'll be more, particularly when you're looking at teams trying to bulk up and do more things earlier in a rebuild. And that's exactly what Doug Armstrong did. And I fully expect lots of managers are going to look at this, particularly if they have cap space, and say, hey, listen, this might expedite our rebuild, and there's going to be pressure from owners to expedite the rebuild as well.
Well, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Pressures from owners too, John. But to go back to what you mentioned before, guys on entry-level contracts, you have superstar players coming in with entry-level deals and guys that you're going to have to sign to these massive numbers. Why not throw an offer sheet someone's way that you're willing to give up a second-round pick for? Who knows if that pick's going to even pan out? Like, I think that you should see more creative ways for some of these NHL GMs to go and work. And I think that that's kind of the direction that most of these things will happen. So I agree with you. I really do believe that you're going to see a lot more here as the years go on.
Totally. It until they renegotiate and make it more punitive than it is right now, I think we're going to see a lot more of this stuff. And I wonder what kind of negotiation that will be between the Players Association and the league. Say, okay, these offer sheets, we like them. They prove that the CBA is working. It's one of those things where you can't complain about where restricted free agency exists. So do we really want to put it and make more of a penalty for a team that signs these guys? And that will be a fascinating negotiation between the PA and Mr. Bettman.
Pat Quinn to Lanny McDonald to Mike Gartner is the faces of the Hockey Hall of Fame selection committee. What do you think of the choice as he takes over?
It makes sense. It's almost part of a lineage. Mike has been actively involved with the Hall for a long period of time, whether it be on the selection committee or be around. Mike is, with his role as a player, with his role with the Players Association, someone has a passion for the game and for the history of the game, as Mike does. I know Mike well. He's one of those guys that, quite frankly, is a true gentleman of the game and will give everybody a thought process to understand. I'm not sure any of the rules will change, guys. I'm not sure we're going to see more transparency with Paul. We might see more of the same. This is I guess the best way to describe it, this is a conservative appointment for a conservative position.
Yeah, it certainly feels like that. Before you go, we were giving our reviews of Tom Brady's debut on television. Some guys get into that seat and you just think, wow, born to do it, born to explain the game and whatever sport we're talking about. Ferraro on a hockey game, early Romo on football. It was not natural for Tom Brady. Is that fair?
True. To me, three things. First of all, I never realized how, and this is, I'm going to be one of the critical guys. I never realized how nasally his voice was until I heard him without being on camera. Because when you're on camera, you can get away with a more nasally voice. The second thing is that Tom Brady has for the longest time been the greatest sports speaker of all time. Talk for 20 seconds, say nothing.
Right.
So now he's having to learn how to talk for 20 seconds and say something. So that's totally contradictory to what he has been. And the other one to me is, in going through lots of broadcast websites this morning and newspapers in the United States, nobody wants to really, in mainstream, nobody really wants to be critical of Tom. So if it was you or Irf or me, Blake, it would be, these guys are brutal. Tom Brady is, it's a work in progress. Tom Brady is, he'll get better. Not bad, he was bad. Now, social media was not really fair to Brady in so many ways. I just find that people in positions of power are giving Tom the benefit of the doubt, which I guess you can do when you sign $370 million for 10 years.
That's what I was going to say. That deal is insane.
Yeah, it's a lot of dough.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw this with Torts. Remember, Torts on TSN was not very good. And he's the opposite, John. Torts is used to saying something. And then he got on TV and started saying nothing. And you know, like, you just never know how these guys are going to react when the lights turn on.
Yeah, he's you know, once you're inside the bubble of being in a professional sport, you have a difficult time knowing when to be critical,
right,
and how to be critical. And he has to learn that. Matt Ryan, I don't know if you saw Matt Ryan on CBS.
Yeah, I did.
Matt Ryan's trying to be more critical. Last year he wasn't. This year he is. So I like not everybody's Boomer Esiason and Phil Simms when it comes to being, you know, straight to the fact, whether you like Esiason or Simms when they were on at all. At least they gave you the goods. You may not have agreed with them. At least they give you the goods.
Sorry, one more question. Do you think that maybe it was better suited for him to be an analyst like Matt Ryan was, as opposed to being the color guy for a game? Do you think it's because it's two completely different things, right?
Yeah. They needed to find somebody to mirror Romo. They needed to find somebody to mirror Aikman. Mm-hmm. So you needed to put Brady on that stage. I think that was the only way to justify the money too. You know, that to me is part of it. Tom's just got to learn to be. Listen, we know he's passionate about the sport. We know he's critical of his teammates. You've seen him yell at them on the sidelines. He just has to learn and find a way to be passionate on the air. I suspect it will come. It's a work in progress, boys.
I think on the sidelines he was just always saying, "Why aren't you as good as me?" And he can't say
allowed
that.
to.
He can't say that on the TV all the time. Why aren't they as good as me?
By the way, what we are going to see a lot more of, and this is something I noticed yesterday, we are going to see a lot more on-camera shots from the booth as long as Brady's on.
That's true too. Yeah.
And then what you're going to see is all the other networks are going to start doing it too all the time. Yeah. So, you know, the over-under now is how many on cameras for a game that Brady is the analyst. The over-under is going to be 10.
My favorite part about calling games on Apple TV, no shots of the broadcast booth.
That means you can wear that ugly shirt.
That's right.
And shorts and flip-flops.
Completely. Yeah, absolutely. John, thanks for this. Appreciate it. Sean. We'll talk to you next week here, and the hockey season is upon us.
Have a good week, boy.